Hello and welcome to the instructor-led training series for MD-4011. My name is Lockie. It's great to be here with you. In this module, Optimize Microsoft Intune for Microsoft Copilot for Security Integration, we're going through exactly what it says on the tin. We're going to look at how Copilot for Security and Intune actually integrate together. Now, both of these tools are powerful in their own, but it really is when they're combined that we're going to see major strength. The true power of Copilot for Security is in its ability to integrate with other products, take information, collate them together, and give you insights that otherwise would be difficult or nigh on impossible to find. So let's go through what we're going to be covering in the module up ahead. Now, the first chunk, exactly as you'd expect. We'll go through a little bit of a recap of what you can get individually with different components of the various products, but then the rest of it's going to be a combination of setup, naming convention groups, things like that. How we actually authenticate into the various products. We're going to need a few different people to help along the way to get ourselves set up with Security Copilot. So we'll go through that step by step. And with the last chunk that is purely focused on use. How we actually make use of the data that we need and ensure that we're only getting the insights from the various pieces of tooling and integrations that are relevant to the question we're asking. So let's begin at the top. Let's talk through what Copilot for Security and Intune offer and the reason why we look at both our integrated inbuilt prompts and custom prompting. Okay, first things first. Our goal here is to be able to create custom prompts for Intune. So when I ask a question of Copilot for Security, I get relevant information back from my Intune environment. So why do we go with Copilot for Security? Because of its ability to streamline this operation together. Usually when I need to go and find information in Intune, it's a number of clicks. There's no real way around that. We need to nest things and we need to collate things together and we need to show the correlations and relationships between, say, a device, a user, and an application. But Security Copilot is able to go through either using the inbuilt prompts or preferably a custom prompt relevant and specific to your environment and be able to give you those insights directly. So if we are able to take the custom prompting engine that we have within Copilot and combine it with all of the things that we get out of Intune, the ability to go through and manage devices of multiple types, to group and organize and ensure compliance, all of that information comes together to give you the best possible impact through integration. By using the power of Security Copilot and all of the things that we get within Microsoft Copilot for Security, we are able to go through and give you a better, quicker response to an incident. We are able to go through and identify threats as they occur in your environment. And as someone who comes from a compliance background, the ability to easily evaluate what our compliance stature is, where the highest risks are, and be able to put that back in natural, plain language. It's the use of the tools together. That is where we find the greatest power. So we are going to need to do some preparatory work. There are some steps we need to take to ensure that everything is going to work smoothly. So let's go take a look now at exactly what is going to be required to get ourselves set up within our environment and make sure that everything is going to integrate out of the box. All right, so our first port of call is a pretty basic place, and it's something that all organizations really need to keep in mind. We need a strong naming convention. I know it's 101 when it comes to setting up our devices in our environment, but having a strong, clear naming convention, in addition to the simplified management, so being able to identify whether a device is, say, an Android device or a Windows device, or maybe if you are interested in the type of device it is, for developers or for C-suite users. Having a clear naming convention that allows you at a glance to know where that device is located or who's using it can help a humongous amount in the event of an incident. Because it then gives you a pattern to match against, we are able to start building out policies that are based purely on that naming convention, or maybe on some details that are relevant to that. So think about what you can do for a clear naming convention of your devices. On top of all of the benefits that we get in the security space, there are clear benefits for those who are using Intune more for the management and troubleshooting of devices itself. Aside from inventory management, the ability to quickly troubleshoot a device purely based on a name, it just helps. There's a complete, huge overall amount of benefit that you are going to get across the ecosystem within your space. So make sure you do have a clear naming convention. What is good about Intune, though, is that even if you don't necessarily have a strong naming convention from day one, it's not the end of the world. It is possible to rename your devices in Intune after the fact. Now, I'm going to show you quickly how you can actually do this, but if you're interested in more details, head on over to learn.microsoft.com where we can go through exactly how we put these things together. The first way to do this is just one by one. Any device in your environment, if you wish to go through and rename it, you can simply go to the device page itself, pick the device, and then select rename. A dialog will go through that has all of the restrictions about what a device can be named. So maybe the length of it that is required for the certain operating system it's using, what characters are going to be allowed. All of that is handled as through the dialog itself. A one-by-one rename like this is not the most efficient way to do things, but sometimes it's what we need. So it's something that's easy to do through Intune. Where there is a really good power is for organizations that are looking to bulk rename their devices. Intune gives you the ability to select some sort of unique identifier for a device and then use that as part of the naming convention for your devices en masse. So as an example, I could pick a variable that is the serial number of device. That tends to be wholly unique for all devices in your environment. So it gives you something that you can add into the name to ensure that all devices have a unique naming convention. You can even just select a random number. Maybe that's all you need. Some sort of string at the end that identifies the device more uniquely. As long as there's some sort of prefix or suffix or something that identifies it for the type of device that it is or who's using it, that's all we really require. The point is consistency. And so you as an organization need to decide how you are going to name your devices and make sure you stick to it. Again, if you need more information, head on over to learn.microsoft.com. We have many different pieces of documentation focused on end user devices, server backend devices, resources in Azure and Microsoft 365 to help you define one of these naming conventions. Okay, part one is a strong naming convention. Once we have that set up, we need to move on to part two. We need groups. Now, groups are useful not just for users. This tends to be what we think of out of the box. I am a user, I need to get added to a group to have certain permissions to an application. Pretty standard stuff. But groups are actually uniquely usable for devices as well. And this can be for troubleshooting purposes, of course, but we use groups, the same ones we use for users, just targeted slightly differently, within Entra ID for Intune directly. So what I'm going to do is take you across to the portal and show you some of the different types of groups we can create, how you go about creating them, and a little bit of a tour of what you can expect to see for your groups in the portal there. We're now over in the Intune portal, and we're going to take a look at group management. Both users and devices can be assigned automatically to groups or individually manually. Now, group management can be done via the Azure portal or the Intune Admin Center. Doesn't matter which way you go, you end up in the same spot. So what we're going to do is manage our groups from here, and I'll show you how to get there. Left-hand side, select groups. I'll hide that blade. And then we'll be able to go through and take a look at existing groups within our environment, as well as any groups that we wish to create. We can do so from here. Now, on the main page, you will note that there are three main types of groups. Microsoft 365 groups, these are used for, say, our mailboxes. Security groups, these are what we're going to use for any environments that we want to go through and set say, permissions within a space. Maybe give someone a specific role within an environment. Now, the last major type of group is a dynamic group. Think of it like a security group, but we're automatically adding users into it based on something about the user, or in our case, device, that is unique to them. So what we're going to do is create a new group and take a look at some of these different types of groups and how they are created. Our main focus is on security groups. It's the main one we're interested in, so we'll go with that. First, set a group name. Make sure it is something that is unique to your environment and easily identifiable. I've gone with administrators. You may wish to go with something a little more specific, such as administrators for a specific environment, such as Contoso here. Next, make sure you give the group a description. Now, it is not required, but it is good practice to have a good and descriptive description, something that actually tells you what it is. Next, there is the option to assign Entra roles to a group. Now, this can be enabled or disabled. It is your call. But note what happens to the membership type drop down just below that if I change the setting. Setting to yes means the membership type is now assigned only. If I wish to use any sort of dynamic membership, I'm not able to select this option. Next, we have 3 options to work with: assigned manually or assigned based on user or group. We're going to assign manually, and I'm going to find myself in here, and we will go through and I'll start affecting some of my permissions based on the group structure. Now we can see that a member has been put in place. Make sure you also put an owner so we know who is responsible for the people within the group, just in case we need to make any alterations in the future. Next, let's select that dynamic user type. Note we're no longer looking at a single member here. Based on properties of the user, we are going to go through and add them automatically into this group. So I just need to select a property of the user. Department's a great example. Maybe we look for all people who have a department of IT administration. If this is the case, anytime a user is created or has a department modified to equal that rule syntax, we now will add them automatically to this group. We can use multiple components here, such as country or job title, maybe even employee ID, to ensure that users are based on more granular components as well. Really, based on the scenario, things are going to change. Now, the third membership type that we have access to is a dynamic device type. The dynamic device type is actually pretty much the same thing as what we saw with the dynamic user component. All we need to do is go through, change the membership type to dynamic device. I'm going to go through and make some changes to my group name and also to my group description here. Add in devices, perfect. And then we'll be able to go through, edit that dynamic query, and we can actually start searching for new conditional properties that are specific to devices in our environment. Now, the main way we are going to get a lot of this information is through Intune. So it is critical that you've already gone through, set this up, and used your best practices. For example, device operating system type or manufacturer are things that we can use as easy points of identification. So if the device OS type equals Android, as an example, we can now dynamically add in user devices directly to this group to ensure that it is added in as part of an administration group or a target group. It doesn't have to be based on the operating system, though. There are many different points of criteria we can use for this automatic group membership. Once we're confident we've got everything set up correctly, all we need to do is hit create and save this query. Now we have created the group, and as devices are generated in the environment that match the specific criteria we set, we'll be able to go through and add them into that environment there. These groups can be leveraged via Intune for a whole range of different scenarios, as well as in the Microsoft 365 space for licensing components. So think about how you can use this for categorization for whatever it is that you need to do in your environment. All right, our last port of call we need to talk to in terms of this prerequisite, pre-setup, are our roles. There are 3 different types of roles we need to manage when it comes to the Microsoft Copilot for Security ecosystem. And it is not a one or the other sort of space. You are going to need someone set up with each of these different roles, and they may not be the same people. The first type of role we need to consider is the Copilot for Security roles themselves, the ones that are built for the application. Copilot for Security roles are meant for those who are going to configure and manage the environment itself, not necessarily the back-end components and not necessarily the broad spin-up, but those who are actual administrators within the security analyst space, going through and creating prompts or managing prompt books. We have 2 different components, 2 different types of roles that are available for Copilot for Security. A Copilot owner, that is who is going to manage some of the back-end configuration within the Copilot for Security space, and a Copilot contributor. That is for those who are going to make use of the environment and start to go through and save things like those prompt books for others to use. Second, we have Microsoft Entra roles. Now, Entra roles are useful for the initial setup component. And when you grant someone a high-level Entra role and they go through and provision Copilot for Security in your environment, effectively flick the button to turn it on, they will actually get assigned a relevant Copilot owner role as well. Effectively, we are going to need a security administrator or a global administrator's help as part of our setup in our environment. So don't forget to plan ahead and make sure that you are working with whoever team is going to manage that component of your environment. Now, the last important role is an Azure IAM role. IAM roles are what we use to actually manage permissions within an Azure subscription. And security compute units, those SCUs that we use for Copilot for Security, they get provisioned into an Azure subscription. So again, we are going to need either a global administrator on the Microsoft Entra side, or more likely, we're going to need an owner or contributor that has permissions to a resource group to be able to deploy those SCUs. For some organizations, this may be the same person for all 3. For many organizations, this will be different teams. So you'll need to coordinate to get this initial provisioning done and make sure the right people have the right roles at the right time. All right, setup is done. We've done all of our pre-work. There is one more step to go. Not so much optional, but more that it's going to be different for every environment that we wish to enable Copilot for Security in. We need to talk about plugins because this is how we're going to hook into Intune. And more broadly, it's how we're going to hook into the rest of the Microsoft ecosystem and a whole range of third-party ecosystem products. Plugins are the mechanism that we use in Copilot for Security to ensure that we are able to reach out to various APIs and pull relevant data back in as part of a prompt. So when you ask a question that says, hey, when did this user last log in? Can you correlate that across to data that I have in my Sentinel environment as an example? That would require you to have access to be able to read data from both of those points. And the plugin system is how we achieve it. Now, Copilot for Security uses a methodology called on behalf of sign-in mechanisms. An on behalf of mechanism, in simple terms, just means that if you can't see it, Copilot can't see it. So enabling plugins in an environment is the initial hookup that lets you be able to view an API. And then you need to have permissions to be able to read data from there to get that information in as part of your prompt. All of the various Copilots in the Microsoft ecosystem are built around this model. So it is always based on the user using them as to what data actually gets returned. So with that in mind, let's go through and actually take a look at what it is to enable and disable certain plugins. And where we have example prompts and prompt books to be able to, well, see how we can use those plugins in real life. Welcome back to Microsoft Security Copilot. Now, we are interested in using the Intune plugin because that's the data source we're interested in leveraging. The easiest way to check what plugins you are currently utilizing within Security Copilot as a general user is to take a look down at the prompt at the bottom of the screen where you see prompts and sources. If we hit that sources button, you'll now be able to see a list of all plugins that are currently enabled in your environment and which ones you are currently making use of. You can see I've pretty much enabled everything here. More services, both Microsoft and third-party, will lead to more comprehensive results, with lots of information from disparate sources being correlated and collated together to give you some very interesting and very clear responses back. But there are a number of scenarios I can think of where we may want to restrict, exactly as we're doing here, some of the data that we're actually looking to surface. By selecting, say, just Intune, I'm only going to get the context that Intune provides. So turning certain data sources on or off may change the type of prompts that we see because Copilot for Security sees less. Microsoft Security Copilot is reliant on these plugins as a way to integrate various other services. Now, if you check the plugin drop-down at the top of the screen, you can also go through and look for various prompts that are inbuilt to the system that are built around the capabilities of a specific plugin. So what groups is a device name a member of is a key example of something that we really only need the Intune plugin to be able to get the information for. There are some other ways to be able to view relevant prompts as well. Head to your prompts and scroll down to the bottom, and you'll see there is a System Capabilities section. By hitting See All System Capabilities, we can search for relevant plugins that have, say, Intune in the name. We have the ability to go through and look at all of the various prompts that are inbuilt into the system and come with the plugin enablement. And down the bottom, you can see that by selecting these various pre-built prompts, we provide certain types of input, and we've effectively got all of the information that is required to find that info out. There are so many different sample prompts available up the top of the screen and within the plugin menu there. So go take a look and see what's available out of the box. Okay, and I promise now all the setup is actually done. You've got your plugins created and hooked up, which means you are now able to see the data that is relevant to you. You know how to customize and turn off and on certain data sources to get information that's relevant. So from here, it's all about prompting practices. Make sure that when you write a prompt, be specific and clear. If you want information related to Intune, write into your prompt that Intune is the source that is relevant to you. Copilot for Security is able to look at all plugins that are currently connected, but if you specify a single plugin as a source of data, it will use that as its primary focus. So make sure you are clear as to what you actually require. Don't take the first prompt as your best go. Iterate, experiment, think about different ways that you can write things. Think about different creative ways that we can phrase stuff. By changing your language, you will get different replies back. So make sure you are utilizing that creative brain and thinking about the different ways you can ask questions. Of course, actually be specific and use Intune in those prompts. I know it feels silly, but you can get easily into a groove with Copilot of Security where you just ask more generic questions. Know that the data is there and be clear that that is what you're interested in, and you will get more relevant responses back. And of course, don't forget your prompt books. The ability to save a chain of different prompts to get a clear response back of a certain scope every time is super useful. And a good prompt book can be shared with others and reused over and over again for great use in your environment. Always remember to monitor and get feedback from others. Whether you're submitting to Microsoft or just submitting it internally, it's important to provide feedback and say, hey, this worked well, or this didn't work so well. I think we can phrase this a better way. The use of Copilot for security within, say, a security operations center is a collaborative environment. It's a collaborative exercise where you're going to work with others to build out this expertise. The more prompts we have, the better the prompt books we generate, the better we get at actually using these prompts. The art and the skill go together to create better results for your environment, to save you time and make better use of your day. All right, let's sum up now. This last module was focused entirely on the integration. When we have Copilot for Security set up, how do we actually go through and make effective use of it, ensure that our data from Intune comes in correctly, and then integrates into those prompts that we get? Ultimately, this is just an exercise in going through and integrating more broadly. And I've shown you where those plugins exist and all of the different plugins within the Microsoft ecosystem you can choose to integrate. So think about using those sample prompts as a kickoff. This is an experimentation and a new technology that you are ready to use in your environment. So plan ahead, experiment, and get ready. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you in the next one.